Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Director's Cut. Last week, we went over the long, extensive. Well, I'm not even going to say it. If you want to see who we covered last week, you could just go check the video. Spoiler. But yes, this week we are doing something a little bit different. We usually cover directors that have kind of a more extensive folio than just two actual director's credits or feature length films, because this man did do direct some shorts and everything, but this is more of a kind of a focus on this man's life. This is the biggest innovator in the business. He definitely entered and the whole Hollywood thing blew up and changed because of this man. And that's Jim Henson. So we're going to be talking Jim Henson, of course, really focusing on, the Muppet movie Labyrinth and Dark Crystal as well, but also talking about everything else all the way up to the movie that's coming out soon that hasn't been released yet, and that's the Happy Time Murders. What a tonal shift from that. So I am not doing this alone. I have very special guests, as always. Season regular, we have Jay Manning from Classic Flips. Flips? Are you doing Flips? Classic Flix. Thank you so much for joining us again, Jay.
Waka waka. Thank you for having me.
And you're the disembodied voice this time. You're doing your best good bad Flix impression.
My best Kermit the Frog impression. Yeah.
Yes, to keep up with the illusion. And for the very first time on the show, you've met The Walking Dead, if you've followed my channel and all, and why would you, on the Walking Dead things. But my sister Debbie comes on quite a bit, so I now have the opportunity to have my other sister, Becki Morgan, coming in from Las Vegas, Nevada. She is a professional makeup artist and effects artist, real artist, if you see all the stuff in the back. So thank you for joining us, Becki.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right. So let's talk Jim Henson. So this, his storied career kind of happened while he was still in college, actually in high school. He's small town in Missouri, I believe. And no, I don't even think it was Missouri. Maybe it was Kansas or something. Now I'm getting my information crossed. But I know he was, he wanted to do something different, and so he started with puppets and marionettes. Jay, what was your first kind of interaction with Jim Henson? Was it the Muppet Show or something else?
The very first introduction to Jim Henson I got was Fraggle Rock. When it was first on, that was the one, and it was like the hippie Muppets, where they had all the same sensibilities and stuff, but they were all just a bunch of hippies living in kind of a commune underground and trolling the old man who lived above. Mr.
Yeah. What was his name? Do you remember his name? Oh, it was
Whose name? Which one?
The old man. The man.
Oh, the man. I don't remember.
Sprocket was the dog.
Was his dog.
Sprocket was the dog. That was what was important. And as far as I guess our first, and I'll kind of set Becki up here, is as far as my first impressions of Muppets and Jim Henson. I remember Becki getting ready for high school, in the morning, every morning. We were talking about this offline, to the Muppet Show. And so I definitely remember that. I remember Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. Becki, what do you remember your first instance with Jim Henson stuff?
Well, I'm gonna age myself here because I'm pretty sure I'm older than both. Well, I know I'm older than you, obviously, but I grew up living. I don't remember a time when Muppets were not in my life. I don't remember a time when I wasn't watching Sesame Street or I didn't know Kermit the Frog. So it's very difficult for me to single in on a moment where it was all introduced, because I feel like I was watching Sesame Street while I in the womb. So I don't know. I grew up. It's in my DNA fiber now, the whole Muppet thing. I guess I come from that generation, which is kind of sad because I feel like this generations coming up or don't even know who the Muppets are. So it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's true. And we already have our first chat member in there, and it is The Walking Deb. She says good morning, and she says Sesame Street, and that's a huge thing. Sesame Street was a huge part of our kind of early upbringing, even with our our shared mother, so to speak. I remember her favorite character being Grover. Yeah, but let's go back a little bit and just talk about, Jim Henson. He graduated high school. I think he bought I think he went to his college graduation with a Rolls Royce, just like a complete self-made man, because he was just making these marionette puppets and doing little talk shows and all this stuff. It's kind of incredible thinking about where he started and to where everything is now. And he met his wife Jane, and they kind of built this empire with all these things. Let's and then Kermit the Frog was kind of a special character that he bring on these late night shows. I don't remember the name. Do you guys remember the name of that first show that he was doing with his wife in like the 60s?
I only know Evening was the Muppet Show. I don't know another.
He brought out like Ralph on a couple of evening talk shows. I forget the names of them. I should be a good nerd and look this up, actually.
Well, Rolf came from they were doing a Purina commercial. Rolf was made for dog food.
Rolf's my favorite Muppet by far.
Piano player or for other reasons?
Well, Rolf's just like chilled. He is the most down to earth Muppet. Rolf never like loses it really or loses his temper. When he does, it's always just really funny. One of the best bits is when I'm sorry, I got a commercial buzzing in my ear here. Rolf is on the Muppet Show trying to read a poem called Silence, a poem by Rolf, and as he's reading it, people keep making noise, and then he freaks out on them. Get out of here!
Yeah, he always he was going back to just Jim Henson, he was the hardest working man in the business. He would do everything from the actual puppet creation to voices and to actual puppeteering. This is jumping ahead a little bit, but there was, I think, when he finally kind of met up with Frank Oz, that it was just kind of like a perfect marriage. And I think he said Frank Oz came to the set on the regular Muppet movie, and he was looking around. And he goes, "Where?" Oh no, it wasn't Frank Oz. It was John Landis, who was a friend, filmmaker John Landis, and he went to the set of the Muppet movie, and he's looking around for Jim Henson, and Jim Henson, he's literally underwater while Jim's doing Kermit's, the Rainbow Song on the Swamp. So you couldn't really find a harder working individual. I think he died when he was 46 years old. He probably looked like he was 64. But I mean, that's the kind of crazy dedication that takes. Beck, what were your big, just your fond memories of just the Muppet Show in general? Because that's, he didn't want to get pigeonholed in a childhood thing, or he didn't want to be. So I guess he started and kind of backtracking. I guess he started Sesame Street first, but he was very hesitant about it because he didn't want to get pigeonholed into doing childhood, just being a childhood producer, or creator. What was your favorite moments from Sesame Street, rather?
Oh wow. That's a lot. There's so many. The thing that still stands out in my head today, and I don't care. I'm old. I'm not going to say how old, but I will sit and watch Sesame Street now, and it holds up. Like, it's legit. So definitely not pigeonholed in my mind. I think that the magic transcends age. I think that's not a thing with Jim Henson. I feel like if you're on the Jim Henson boat, you're on the Jim Henson boat until you die. It doesn't matter how old you are. As far as Sesame Street, memorable moments for Sesame Street, pretty much, and I still will watch this today, and it'll be in my head for a month. It's the phenomenon.
Phenomenon.
Phenomenon. Yeah. So so that still, it's not only memorable, but it's the music too. The music, I like hone in on music a lot. And then the pinball. You guys remember the pinball cartoon?
Oh, the pinball was great.
The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I could sit here and recite all the music, but yeah, I mean, and then of course the characters in between that were always so entertaining and poignant. and then had this amazing ability to teach a lesson. It was either, the Count teaching you how to count, or it was Kermit teaching, or Bert and Ernie teaching you morals. Like it just was this incredibly vast thing. And I think especially for kids who grow up in a chaotic environment, which I'm not going to mention, but things like that, programming, you get an hour while you're a kid, or half an hour, however long it was, of just this world full of positive things. And every character that he created, they were all lovable. Even Oscar the Grouch, who was my personal favorite, was Oscar.
I love how Oscar was voiced by the same person that voiced Big Bird. You had that complete crazy dichotomy of
talk about two contrasted characters too.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's funny because my son, who's 8, just recently discovered that he loves plushies, but he also recently discovered that Big Bird had a teddy bear named Radar that he would carry around with him all the time. And my son Oliver, he now he has a teddy bear named Radar. And it was just weird that that's the thing. Like that was the thing. It wasn't Kermit the Frog and it wasn't Grover. It was Big Bird, his teddy bear named Radar, which was super adorable always when I was a kid. But my son now has a teddy bear in his room called Radar because he saw that twice. So it's funny how that works.
Does he get to? Are you having him watch a lot of Sesame Street?
I have. When he was younger, we watched Elmo and Grouchland more times than I would ever like to admit or talk about. I feel like I need therapy after how many times I've seen Elmo and Grouchland. But I feel like we all need group therapy because there's only so many times I can watch Vanessa Williams be the trash queen or whatever she was. But it's too much for me. But no, he has his little things, obviously, but just it didn't stick the way that I would have liked it to, of course. Then I could have related to him. I'm like, look, it's Kermit. It's the Rainbow Connection. Why aren't you crying? And he's like, Mom, I don't know.
Well, there's just so much out there now to look at, and everything's so kind of loud and visual, and kind of Tim Burton-y if we're talking about last week, Jay, right?
Well,
it's
now
just
like Five Nights at Freddy's.
Yeah. And we wonder why we have so much violence. No, I was joking. Nice segue from Sesame Street and the counting to Five Nights at Freddy's. My youngest doesn't even like going into a Chuck E. Cheese anymore because that damn thing.
See, my son loves the characters, but he won't actually play the game. He doesn't like but he'll watch people playing the game on YouTube.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I went into the wrong, movie reviews, and Magic was the wrong outlet. I should have been, opening up little packages of bullshit and watching Five Nights at Freddy's gameplays.
Do you guys remember the Sesame Street bit where it's Bert and Ernie in an Egyptian tomb, and an Egyptian version of Bert and Ernie come out of the sarcophagus? It's terrifying.
I think I
do. The late 70s.
Remember that.
Go on YouTube and watch it. It'll scare the shit out of you. and because Henson, they all knew how to use stillness in their puppetry and moving things just a tiny bit to change the expression on something. And when evil Egyptian Bert turns around out of the thing, it's friggin' scary. That's what I need therapy for, is that bit.
I thought it was funny that Frank Oz. I was watching an interview with Frank Oz, and he said, "No, Bert and Ernie weren't modeled after Jim and I," and blah blah. Blah. And then, in the same interview, he's like, "Okay, so it was kind of the relationship that we had, because Frank Oz was very kind of dry and very matter of fact, very black and white, and Jim was just more the idea man, and I'm just gonna, so busy and getting everything done. So it was great that you got to see even on." The show that Jim Henson, I'm sure he was extremely proud of Sesame Street, but that wasn't what he wanted his legacy to be, was to be, child programming. But it's just kind of funny that they got to encapsulate that relationship between those two.
Those two were, I guess, and I don't know how true the story is. I saw it on an interview back in the day that the way Frank Oz would take Miss Piggy at the end of the shoot and place her gingerly in the case that he had, folded her arms in and made sure she was all nice and comfortable, and then closed the case and gently place it to the side. But Jim Henson would take Kermit and just like whip him off his wrist into a box in the corner. And Frank, I was like, Jim, these are our creations. These are things that people cherish. And before he's like, no, it's a fucking sock, Frank. And he just walked away. And like probably went to wash his hand after 8 hours of puppeteering.
Oh yeah.
But I love how you can contrast his character.
Kermit can take it.
Yeah. Kermit's a trooper, but Miss Piggy's probably telling him, "You better put me in that case." Nice and soft.
Yeah, it was so fun to have that kind of ad-libbing and everything going on in the Muppet Show. Something as small as there was like a decision where Frank Oz just decided to, instead of slapping Kermit across the face, she does the hi-ya like karate chop, and that just becomes an iconic thing. And that was just off of something that Frank Oz just almost accidentally came up with at one point. But going back to they got huge over Sesame Street. They started getting all this cash flow in. The company, he had 1 million kids, Brian Henson included, who's now pretty much in charge of whatever Jim Henson Industries or whatever it's called. But they started getting all this cash flow, and so Jim was, from what everyone was, all the reports about him, he was never someone that wanted to rest on his laurels. He's like, okay, we did this, we're successful, now we got to move on. And that, kind of segues into the Muppet movie. Man, this was something that talk about still holding up. I can still watch the original Muppet movie today and be so damn entertained. It was like that first kind of, it was almost like what's it called? Like a collab movie too. Cause it was just like, you got celebrity after celebrity making cameos, and it was just absolutely fantastic. And it wasn't written, even though it was the Muppets and some Sesame Street characters, it was not just written for children. All ages could enjoy the Muppet movie. Agreed.
I still love the Muppet movie, and the soundtrack was phenomenal. And he was very good about that too. I mean, they incorporated music in such a way that it was unforgettable. You could sing along, and those are songs today that I know by heart. So that's pretty awesome too.
I have one question. How the hell do they get Muppets to ride bikes? I know a lot of stuff about visual effects and stuff, but that blows my mind. The fact I don't know, and if you explained it to me, I probably wouldn't get it.
That was another interview. It was the same kind of special I was watching, and John Landis again was just like, I don't understand what I'm looking at here. He walked on the set, and he saw Kermit just riding next to him on a bike, just completely free. He's like, I still don't know how the hell they did that.
It's amazing.
The movie gets to cheat with perspective a lot, because on the Muppet Show you can get away with having Kermit the same kind of height as everyone else because they're on their stage, they have control of their environment. But here they're out in the real world, but still, if it's a close shot of Kermit and like a human, he still comes up to his chest. Yeah, if you cut away from him, he's only 18 inches tall.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just one of those things.
Yeah, and then he decides to do then he decided to make the jump into feature film, and this was something that was interesting, is because his film careers, and I can't remember the names now. I should have wrote this down. I'm a bad host, but he had a acting role in that weird movie that was just man, what was it called? But it was just like him in different areas. It was very 1960s, very 1970s, very visual, jumping around and stuff like that. But his kids have gone on and say that if you want to know kind of any kind of window into our father's head, it was that portrayal right there in that movie, which I'll look up in a second when I'm not talking. But and then he also directed a couple episodes for Twilight Zone-ish kind of shows. So he always wanted to break into kind of mainstream Hollywood film, and he always looked like he had a huge liking for an obsession with sci-fi and fantasy, which brings us to his first feature-length film, and that's The Dark Crystal. And I mean, real quick, the thing I want to say about Jim Henson directed movies, which was just Dark Crystal and Labyrinth, were box office bombs. They did absolutely terrible at the box office, and he got extremely discouraged for how much work and how much heart he put in to everything. I mean, you look at the Dark Crystal, talk about that movie freaking holds up better than any new Alice in Wonderland schlock that we were talking about last week.
Yeah, the Dark Crystal is magical, and it's nothing short of epic. The Dark Crystal. I mean, the sets and the costume design for the actual puppets and animatronics. It's completely. I just watched it the other day, the first time in a long time, and it still holds up. Yeah, for sure.
The Blu-ray transfer of the Dark Crystal was amazing. I will put in one thing here. Jim Henson also he directed The Great Muppet Caper as well.
Hmm.
That was another one of his. But since we're on the Dark Crystal, the puppetry in that is just it's unparalleled. You can't find any. There's nothing wrong with it. Even when a character has a strange voice and is completely unappealing to the eye. I mean, that Chaplain guy or the Chamberlain guy, you want to beat the shit out of him for wailing in your face like that. But by the end, when the trial by stone comes up, you just can't wait to see who wins.
And such iconic scenes, like everyone thinks of the Temple of Doom dinner scene, with monkey brains and everything. But that first, 10 minutes with all the Skeksis eating these little things, and it's just so disgusting and terrifying. That's maybe what held this back, because it is such a scary looking film.
Well, yeah, and like you were saying before, how actually, it was a point I was making before when we were talking about Sesame Street and all these amazing, lovable characters. Jim Henson did horror really well.
Absolutely.
Really well. And he, I mean, let me tell you something. When you're a creative mind in that way, I would not in a million years compare myself to Jim Henson, but I can kind of relate. There is a fine line between like Disney and Freddy Krueger, and I mean that. I mean that there's really a fine line. If you look even back at old Disney films, obviously we're looking at like Wicked Queen and this transformation of the crone, and there's just this fine line, and Jim Henson really rode that fine line and really kind of brought that to light when he created things like the Dark Crystal. I mean, the creatures in the Dark Crystal are by far, there's not one lovable, cute creature, really.
Even the Gelflings are weird looking.
Yeah, even the Gelflings are a little weird, but there's nothing like cute and cuddly. I mean, there's the little Fizzgig, her little dog thing, that little round fuzzy thing.
That thing's a son of a bitch, though.
But that thing has like teeth in its throat. Did you guys I'm like, that is the most disgusting little thing. And she's like, oh, it's Fizzgig. No, it's not just Fizzgig. I mean, it's got 3 rows of teeth. It's awful. So even like the cutest animal or creature in that movie is sort of hideous. And I love like it was this complete polar opposite from the Muppets. So it was pretty awesome in that way.
What's the main guy's name? Jen, the Gelfling there?
Mm-hmm. Jen, yeah.
He's not even the hero. His friend there, Kira, is that her name?
Yeah, good memory.
She keeps saving his ass. And then she it's been a while since I've seen the movie. She dies at the end, doesn't she?
Well, kind of.
Kind of.
She gets reborn or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they bring her back.
But
when the Mystics and the Skeksis merge, big spoiler alert, I'm sure everyone's seen it by now, but
yeah,
when they merge at the end, they give her back her life. So she lives. She dies and then she lives.
Okay. At least she doesn't totally get the shaft, because all I remember through that movie is Kira saving his ass multiple times.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's even some adult themes in that, because I mean, Agra does. I think I speak for Becki and Debbie in the chat as well. I get a little Linda, which was our mom's name, vibe from Agra, but she is sporting. She is sporting some mean headlights in that movie as well.
Oh, God.
She's a independent woman.
Well, there's no underwire in that realm, I guess. I don't know. There's just not a lot of hardware for that situation in the Dark Crystal world, I guess. I don't know. Ogra is terrifying. Yes. Yeah, we have.
And she's one of the good guys, and she's nightmare fuel. She takes out her eye, and she's it's just absolutely terrifying. She's this like demonic looking, has goat horns and shit.
But
it's
enough
just
about Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Oh, nice.
Oh, she's better hair.
Way to be meta.
Sorry, I couldn't help it.
Does Sarah Huckabee sport the underwire at least? Hopefully.
I don't care. All I know is from the neck up, she's a disaster. Especially
showed up dressed like the Hamburglar to one of the things the other day.
Oh man.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So again, back on track. Dark Crystal,
Sorry.
absolutely fantastic film. But it was so emotionally draining because from everything I've heard, it's not like I knew the guy. I think he died before I was born. No, that's not true. He died in 1990. I was a wee John, but from everyone around him, he was just so drained physically and emotionally with everything that he put into the Dark Crystal. And it was critically panned at the time, and it just bombed in the box office because you see Jim Henson's name on it and you expect the Muppets, and that is definitely not what you got with this film. So he decided to go back and do the Muppet Show some more, and I think the Muppet Show went on for about 5 years and was very successful. And then in 1986, he gets the idea that he wants to try again at film, and we got 1986 Labyrinth. And talk about a movie that just shaped my life as far as loving movies and loving film and everything in between. Labyrinth is like that. I can't. That. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but it is absolute. Labyrinth is just we use this word probably too much or a lot at least. Jay, Labyrinth to me is a masterpiece.
I hate this movie. I'm kidding.
But it has the body part.
My heart just like broke in like 10,000 pieces. Oh my god.
I totally gotcha. No, I like David Bowie just as a concept. A friend of mine made a chart. He made a chart between ultimate masculinity and ultimate femininity, where on ultimate masculinity you had like Rambo, and femininity you had like Marilyn Monroe, but right in the middle is David Bowie.
Hell yeah.
And that's where I am. I'm right in the middle with Labyrinth. We're like, yeah, it's a really good movie and all that. I'm not a huge fan of it. But I totally respect the artistry and music and come on, the cod piece. It's like that one scene in Aliens. You can't unsee it once you've been alerted to her, to the end of Teen Wolf, where you're like, oh, hey, David Bowie, what's up?
Yeah.
That was Jennifer Connelly. That was her first movie, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yes. That was my first female obsession, I think. And still going strong.
Good. Not a bad one to have at all.
We watched Labyrinth like every day after school for like a year straight. I'm pretty sure. I made my little brother watch because I was obsessed with David Bowie. And it's a really great way that you described him, like somewhere between Rambo and Marilyn Monroe. That's like pretty much perfect, especially when we're talking about like Jareth. Where he's like a badass, but he's also, wearing makeup and has big hair.
He's a romantic man.
He's a romantic man, yeah.
Jack Sparrow before it was cool.
Right? Yeah, in a sense, sort of, yeah. I was always mad at her watching Labyrinth at the end, going, why? Forget the baby. What do you...
You fucking hate that kid anyways.
You hate the kid. Let him have the kid. The kid's a goblin. It's fine. Now
I hate the kid.
David Bowie. Like, are you kidding? I'll trade my own son for David Bowie.
Oh, Oliver.
I don't know. Depends on the day. But no, but again, it's really funny because Labyrinth marries those two skills, those two wheelhouses, I should say, for Jim Henson, where it marries sort of the cute Muppetness and it marries the Dark Crystalness. So it's this perfect combination of the two, and then you have this rock star in the middle of it. It's like, I don't know, it's kind of mind blowing. It's just this boggly, amazing, and it somehow it works. I know that there's a lot of backlash for Labyrinth. There's a lot of people that don't like Labyrinth, but I am not one of them. I think it's because, again, it's one of those movies that's like part of my childhood and my fiber. I mean, from the music to just it being Muppets. Essentially Muppets. But,
yeah. Well, let's talk about creature design too, because Dark Crystal went from something that everything was like you said, everything was terrifying. Even the good guys, you know, Agra was a good guy, and she was like, ugh, she kept you up at night. But then you go to Labyrinth, where it's a mix of live action and you know people in costumes, and also you know Muppets and everything, more traditional puppets. And just the creature design in Labyrinth was so diverse, because you had kind of a template in Dark Crystal where you had, you know, the Mystics, the Skeksis, you had these kind of race classes, more kind of traditional like Dungeons and Dragons kind of, you know, style of genre, of fantasy genre. And then you go to Labyrinth and you have this young girl, you have Jareth, who looks like he's right out of a Rat video, and then you have, you know, a talking worm, a giant Bigfoot, a dwarf that kind of looks like a goblin. By the way, Hoggle, in my opinion, I don't know why, I always liked the arc of Hoggle. Hoggle was always my favorite, even though he's kind of a whiny bitch. He's always kind of my favorite character. He is that he's that everyman kind of thing, and he has this nice payoff, and he kind of finds his courage at the end. And he's voiced by Brian Henson, who I think he did an absolutely fantastic job.
Do you know where where Hoggle is now? The real Hoggle is like in a roadside attraction somewhere off of Route 66. It's like in some random. It's super random. But the rest of the Labyrinth guys are actually in the Museum of Puppetry, which is on my bucket list in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. Where like if you walk in, you'll cry, because it's like Bert and Ernie are right there, and then Big Bird is right. It's all the original guys, but all the Labyrinth guys are there. But yeah, Hoggle's actually one of my favorite characters too. He's legit. And I love that he's the link between her and Jareth in a way, you know,
right,
during her journey.
Yeah, I mean, and Jareth would rather, you know, Jareth and Bowie Bulge be the link between them, but I mean, even that's a kind of, I mean, it had a creepy vibe, it had a creepy tone. Like, he's not a young man, and she's a very young teenager, and there was this kind of thing, and they dress her up in the ball scene and all this. But you're right, the movie was or the music rather was absolutely fantastic. It jumps in your head, and it just does not get out of there. You know, Magic Dance. I pretty much put on at least, you know, once a week, maybe twice a week, for my kids to get them up in the morning and get them all moving and stuff. It's haunting music, and it's just absolutely fantastic. So, yeah, Jay, what is it that you didn't like about Labyrinth?
I wouldn't say there's any one thing I particularly dislike, but it's just one of those movies that never hooked on me. It's kind of like The Princess Bride, where I get it. I know why it's so popular and so beloved, but if I could go the rest of my life without seeing it, I'd be okay with that. I guess because I was always used to the comedic Henson, the Fraggle Rock, the Muppet Show, and jump back to the Muppet Show real quick. He knew how to unsettle you with some of that puppetry, and he carried it over into the Dark Crystal and in Labyrinth. And it's been at least a decade since I've even seen a frame of Labyrinth, so maybe it's worth another look. But the artistry is top notch. You could watch the movie on mute and still enjoy every visual aspect of it. And there's an artist, Brian Froud, who drew a lot of conceptual art and stuff. Pardon the giant truck going by right now. Who made a lot of conceptual art that Henson based a lot of those puppets on for those movies. So I respect it, even if I don't consume it as much as the fans do.
Sure. And that's totally fair. It's just, yeah, maybe it just hit me right at that right time, and Becki as well. You know, that age, I was a ripe 3 years old when this movie came out, and it just was embedded into my brain all the way up till now. But yeah, it just has everything you want, and like, you know, Debbie says in the chat, you know, there was never anything like it, and there never will be. Both movies had comedy, fun creatures, and they were both pretty dark. And that's true. You don't get to see a lot of that anymore. It's just all kind of, you know, special effects, gobbledygook at this point, but it's not as tactile feeling films nowadays, especially for children, that a Labyrinth or a Dark Crystal were. But yeah, after that, that's when he kind of he ended the Muppets and jumped into Fraggle Rock, like we've kind of talked about. And Fraggle Rock is something that I remember watching, and I remember it was on kind of in the background, but it was not something that I was super excited when it was on. I thought it was fun. And Becki, correct me if I'm wrong, because I was so young, but I don't really remember like wanting like Fraggle Rock merch or anything like that. I was more obsessed with dinosaurs at that point.
Yeah, I mean, and there wasn't a lot of Fraggle Rock merch. That wasn't a thing. Now, I loved Fraggle Rock, and it was on HBO, so it was a cable thing, and we did watch it regularly. So it was not only a cable. I mean, it was on HBO, so we watched it commercial free, which was something awesome, I thought, because we could watch this thing, and we watched it regularly. We knew the names of all the people, and you knew, but I don't. Merch wise, no, this was not like a big merch pool for Henson, but it was just fun to watch. Like, and we did watch it regularly. I don't know that you got super. You were also into like the real Ghostbusters and other stuff. I mean, you had like boys stuff going on. So maybe Fraggle Rock it just didn't click with you at that point, at that age. But I loved it, and I was older than you, so I watched it regularly. Like, I loved the little doozers and all that stuff. But yeah, it just wasn't a big merch pool. No.
I had a Fraggle Rock lunchbox.
Nice.
That's as far as I went.
I bet you could put your kid through college if you sold that now.
Right.
I will never sell it, and he can fend for themselves. I do have a vintage Muppet Show lunchbox. Not, I lost the Fraggle Rock one years ago, but I do have a Muppet Show lunchbox from like the 70s. I posted it to your Twitter earlier.
Oh, nice.
That's so rad.
That's awesome. And even Fraggle Rock, something as kind of, it was a step. It wasn't quite as for little kids as Sesame Street was, but it was definitely marketed for a younger audience. But even that had some terrifying things, like the trash heap, the compost lady, and all those big fucking things. I forgot what they were called, but they're just basically there to eat Fraggles, right?
Oh yeah, the big giant things. Yeah, I don't remember their names, but I remember Audrey, the big trash heap that had a New York accent. She had like New York sewer rats were her friend. So,
as a New York resident, Jay, was that a good accent or not?
I don't live in the city, so I'm not one to judge on it. But I loved when the doozers would build stuff, or like if Wembley was there taking a nap, the doozers would build their things around him, and they would eat Fraggle Rock had a lot of morality plays in it. It had a lot of social commentary on it between the doozers, who were supposedly the bottom of the food chain, but they made all the stuff that the Fraggles ate, and the guys, the giants who lived above, viewed Fraggles as pests. But then you had the human world beyond that. I loved Uncle Traveling Matt when he would get his postcards and say, "Dear Gobo, these silly creatures engage in a ritual known as talking. They will they will converse with one another." There was a lot of social commentary going on with Fraggle Rock.
And just from a production standpoint, the Fraggle Rock did like you said, scale very well. You had these tiny little things, and they were kind of building things around the Fraggles, and then there was bigger things in the Fraggles. There's humans and giants and Sprocket the dog. That must have been just such a headache and such an undergoing trying to and this is in the golden age of effects, right? There was really there's maybe some camera trickery as far as shooting these things with scale, but no like real green screen or anything. So I mean, it's just another notch on the innovative belt. And at that point, I think he was kind of starting to wear down a little bit, and that's when they were trying to sell to Disney. And I heard, between Jim Henson and Michael Eisner, they were trying to get that going, and that was such a long, grueling process. And Jim Henson was a very holistic person. It was his upbringing. I think they were like Christian Scientists or something when they were kids. So he just never went to the doctor. And then just one day he came down with pneumonia and went. I guess the ER doctor said if they took him in an hour earlier, it probably would have been a completely different story. But he wound up going, septic, and that's it. And that's so unfortunate. 1990, we lost him. But again, someone like this, so iconic, change the industry completely. I still like that. Jim Henson Productions is going strong. I think Brian Henson has done a fantastic job with the company and the whole Henson family, the brothers and the sisters. And now, they're still making these Muppet movies. They're still making Sesame Street, of course. But now we're getting stuff like Happy Time Murders. And I don't know if you guys saw the Red Band trailer to this, but it is Dick and Fart Joke Central. It's Sausage Party, but with Muppets. I don't know how I feel about it.
Well, it's like Muppets with nipples. I mean, I don't. It is a different turn.
But Agra didn't have a brassiere.
Well, neither do these. But I mean, I don't know how at this time in this social climate and the way that entertainment is today, how are the Muppets to survive? I mean, do they need to create these sorts of pieces so that they can fuel other projects that would be more Muppet-like, as more traditionally Muppet-like? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how that is working. I know that going back to the merger with Disney a long time ago, that I was so excited when that happened, because my two favorite worlds sort of came together. Where I was working at Disneyland at the time California Adventure opened, or DCA as super nerds call it. And I was so excited to see that there was a place to go see the Muppets. There was the Muppet 3D, and I know it had been on the East Coast for a long time, but we finally got it on the West Coast, and I was like, oh my God, I can go see the Muppets at Disneyland. Like, my brain broke. It was like when, Star Wars came to Disneyland. It was like, oh my God, I can go see, Yoda at Disneyland. It's crazy. So I don't know how, but now that that's not a thing, I don't know how practical or financially, I don't know how that how they're going to evolve. And maybe they have to evolve this way to appease people in this, like I said, social climate, so that they can continue to evolve in other ways. So I don't know. That's the only way I can make sense of it.
We've seen the Muppets try to evolve into TV before with like that the Muppets show that was on a couple years ago. That was basically the Muppets, or The Office, but with the Muppets.
Mm-hmm.
Because the original Muppet Show was just to take on those variety shows that were on TV all the time, and sometimes they were cheesy, and sometimes they worked and they didn't. Maybe it's time to let sleeping dogs lie with the original Muppets, and something like the Happy Time Murders can kind of fill it in. I worry about it being too much like Crank Yankers and that kind of. You remember that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I do remember Crank Yankers.
I hope the humor can be smart and they didn't just put the stupid jokes in the trailers, because there were always jokes that were very highbrow in Muppets. And Jim Henson's one of those losses. I mean, it's been like almost 30 years since he died, and you can still feel his loss. Tell me he wouldn't have brought his awesome magic to the Harry Potter movies. Can you imagine if those were done by Henson, especially the first two? Those I think would have, for as good as they are, maybe benefited from his touch. And a little bit of trivia: I think the last thing Jim Henson had any supervision on was the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie. Right before he died, because the Turtles and the puppets, which were great, were done through the Jim Henson Company.
And they did. They look absolutely fantastic. Did you ever? Were you a fan of Farscape?
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean
those were done.
So
those are great.
Yeah. And I mean that's something that you felt thumbprints on. So I don't know necessarily. And you guys mentioned social climate, like in this kind of social climate where it's kind of not as funny. Dick and fart jokes aren't as funny or tasteful as they have been in the past. It's not really the 1990s anymore. I don't know. It just seemed like such a crazy stark shift. And I was a little bit off put, not to be a grump or like a stick in the mud, but I was a little off put by the trailer. I don't think it's something that, with a million children like I have, it's not something that I would take my kids to at all. But it's directed by Brian Henson too. So I mean, it is the important people involved in this, but and just Melissa McCarthy, I'm not a big fan of either, to be honest.
Yeah,
no, me neither.
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't know. I don't know her. I don't know her stuff really. I'm not in a hurry to go run out and watch Melissa McCarthy movies. But I mean, did you guys see Avenue Q? Do you guys know about Avenue Q?
No.
I did not.
So Avenue Q was it was a Broadway show that was puppets, but it was vulgar. It was very blue. And I saw it here when it was in Vegas, and it was funny, and it did really well. It had a great run, and I don't know if it's still playing in New York or whatever, but it was off Broadway, and it was super successful for a long time. Avenue Q. We used to have these big fuzzy cars that would, like cabs that were wrapped in like Muppet fuzz to promote the Avenue, and they would like drive down the Vegas Strip to promote the Avenue Q at that time. But it was obviously very Muppet-like. I don't think the Henson company had anything to do with this particular production, but it was obviously when I saw the trailer for the new film, it very much reminded me of Avenue Q. And it's something interesting you guys should Google. It wasn't a film, it was a Broadway show, but it was very blue and it was very risque. It was all puppets, and I think they had some human interaction, but it was unnerving to watch when I first saw it, because it was like, oh, Muppets, but they're shtupping, and that's weird. So, this new film reminds me kind of like a cross between Avenue Q and South Park.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of over South Park. I don't know. I know it's iconic and the jokes are funny, and I get it. And I watched South Park for a long time, but it's I can't sit and like binge watch South Park.
You're still not into it after 21 years?
I used to be more into it, but I don't know. I just South Park, and I can't. It's not. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
I see a lot of that in this new trailer. I'm like, it looks like South Park with puppets.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just I don't know. It has the right people involved in it, but it's just one of those things where it's just like it's probably made for our generation of people that grew up with this IP, and then now you get to see that, and it's kind of a payoff for some people. But I don't know, and I hope I'm wrong, because more Muppets the better, right? Like if this works and this is groundbreaking and starts something, and the Muppets gain more notoriety, then that's great, because I even watched Brian Henson's what was it called? It was like the Muppet contest show where he had people on and these different innovators, and they had to build creatures and stuff like that. So it is fantastic. There's so much that you could still do, and I'm sure that they're still very much involved in practical effects and everything with other things. But it's not. You're right. We don't just get straight Muppets anymore. But yeah, that's kind of the life and times of Jim Henson and the whole Henson Corporation. This man just completely changed Hollywood forever, and that's for just having a couple movies directed under his belt. I still want to do a director's cut on this, but I want to thank my special guests from Las Vegas, Nevada, my sister Becki Morgan, professional makeup artist and all the like. Where can everyone find you?
I have an Instagram. I'm at Rebecca Morgan, traditional spelling of Rebecca, Rebecca Morgan Creative on Instagram. I also have a little shop during the holidays where I actually make hand painted ornaments, usually dark horror or dark Disney themed, and that's called Haunted Holidays Shop, at Haunted Holidays Shop, also on Instagram. And that's where I'm working right now. I have my own channel, Rebecca Morgan, on YouTube. You can look it up. I'm not super active on YouTube right now, but I do have a couple of Disney bound-esque makeup tutorials on there right now, so you can go there too.
Awesome. And series regular Jay Manning from Classic Flix, thank you so much again for coming on, talking all things Muppets. Where can the good kids find you, sir?
Oh, you can find me on the Twitter under my name, and I'm having a video that I wrote premiere on the channel on YouTube called Trexpertise. I am going to officially announce and plug that right now.
Yay! Awesome.
That's it.
That's awesome, Jay. Love having you on. Becki, loved having you on. This was awesome. Until next time, we're going to I'll announce kind of on social media who we're going to be covering next for the next episode of Director's Cut. But yeah, thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next time.